And we are back for another episode of Weightlifting Academy, and things are a little bit different today. Michael apparently has gotten a lot prettier, and has got two heads, as you can see. Pretty cool. No, actually, we have today a special guest, Gwen Sisto. You might have heard of her from her kick butt performance at Nationals this year. Gwen, how you doing?
I'm doing really well today.
Awesome. And who's the little one over here?
This is LG. She kind of snuck in here.
What's up, LG? How you doing?
Good.
If you've never heard of LG, she's the strongest little lady in America right now. She is a weightlifter. I don't know this, but she is. She's I've seen her train in the training hall at Nationals, which is serendipitous.
Oh yeah, she's got wicked good technique. Definitely.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your connection to weightlifting and things like that. Like, what's going on with you, other than your, amazing third place at Nationals, which is pretty cool, I would say. How did you get started in weightlifting?
Oh, it's so weird. It's kind of like when I was a kid. I mean, when I was like this age, all they had was soccer and softball for girls. Like, I grew up in suburban New Jersey, so it was like a soccer town, and I hated ball sports. I didn't want anything to do with ball.
Yeah.
So I didn't really play any sports, which was bad because I had got basically only physical activity on the weekends, and then that's if it was sunny out, right?
You swept the floor, and then that was it.
Yeah, I rode my bike on nice
That's what I did.
days. Yeah, so basically I feel like I'm like 10 years behind anyone who does any athletics, because usually they're doing stuff when they're like her age. So, I mean, other than maybe horseback riding, maybe like twice a month, I did nothing. And then finally, my brothers, I had a brother in high school who was into sports like football and wrestling.
Yeah.
So he wanted to get stronger for those sports, and he saw an ad in the local news, not an ad, it was an article in the local newspaper about this weightlifting team in Sayreville that, what's it called? They just went to a local meet, and there were pictures of kids lifting, and so he called them up and said, hey, I want to come train. It was just in this Polish guy's garage.
Yeah.
So after a while he was doing that, he was like, hey, we need girls for the teams. Do you guys want to join? And I had this epiphany. I was like, wow, this could be awesome. It's an individual sport. It's not subjective.
There's no balls.
There's no balls, and like who wins based on like how much you lift. It's kind of like an absolute thing. Because
Yeah.
I always the funny thing is, even though I did know sports as a kid, when I was like 5, actually or 4, whatever, I remember seeing FloJo win the Olympics. And I was like, I want to be like FloJo.
Yeah.
Really powerful and be like the best at something. So I was like, oh, I could be the best at weightlifting. That could be something cool.
Yeah.
So I lifted as a junior, and I made like junior teams for USA weightlifting, and I have to train like the Olympic Training Center at camps and things like that. But I don't know, like I think I was just strong but had horrible techniques. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to train.
Yeah.
My coach stopped training me after like a couple years because my brother quit. It was like this whole thing. Okay. So I was just training in my garage on crappy equipment, no idea what I was doing. I was still able to do pretty decently. But anyway, so finally I got to college, and it was really tough to train because I was training at Georgia Tech for my undergrad, and I was training with like the football players. And again, I was just by myself lifting, whenever it wasn't disturbing the football players' training sessions or whatever. I usually train with cheerleaders. By the way, the cheerleaders were far more explosive than many of the football players and could lift more than some of them. So
Yeah, I actually thought it would be a good idea for us to go around recruiting cheerleaders.
It's
That's not a crazy idea.
It's not at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wound up somewhere along there having my kid and meeting my husband and having my kid. So I kind of had a little hiatus. But I met Ivan, who's now my coach. I actually didn't let him coach me till after I started dating him, and totally like.
Is this always your rule? Like, I will not be coached by anyone who I'm not dating.
I will not be coached by anyone until I fully vet them.
It's actually probably okay on your end. Maybe on his end it'd be a problem.
Yeah, it would.
I will only coach people that I'm dating.
Oh, God, that would be a real party. How many listeners do you have now?
Some of them have really weird beards too. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, we do. We have a dude who has a weird like goatee. It's kind of cool. Yeah. So then I started. I had Gwen, had a little time off, little gap in lifting there for a couple years, and then I started training again. And then I had someone who actually knew what they were doing in terms of coaching.
Right.
And so now I'm like way better an athlete, and I'm doing way better in lifting.
Nice. Yeah, you are doing quite well. That is a fact. Well, that's interesting. So, yeah, you and I, we met via the internet a couple of years ago, I suppose, if you want to call it that. But one of the things I thought was kind of cool about you is that you are not just a weightlifter. You're also, Mrs. Smarty Pants. So tell us a little bit about that. I think there's a lot of people in the country who, if we were somebody completely outside of weightlifting, you might think it was incongruous. But if you're somebody in weightlifting, you realize like how not incongruous it is to have a very mathy or techie or some other kind of sciencey background and be into weightlifting.
Yeah,
So
sciencey.
yeah, like we get along a little bit for a reason. You're more past the awesome weightlifter exterior. There's a little the internal dork going on.
Yeah, we could talk Diffie Q with each other. I mean,
sing it.
DBGT, you know.
Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what's going on there?
Okay, so when I went to Georgia Tech, I was going there for aerospace engineering. I did some cool shit. I did like undergraduate research on missiles, and we won this AIAA. It's for I forget what the acronym, but it's like the aerospace. It's like the aerospace. What's it called? Association. AIAA is like the ME. I'm getting off topic, but it's really important. So we won a design competition. I was on a team with grad students, and we designed this long-range liquid booster target vehicle. So it was basically like a missile that could act like other missiles of interest that the U.S. could use as target practice.
Yeah.
And we could say threats. We had to say missiles of interest throughout the whole presentation.
Okay.
And it was cool. It was a liquid, and the thing is, there's very few liquid booster ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Like a lot of them have solid propellant, and so we were trying to be like, well, how can we tune the plume? And I did some stuff with delta H's and specific heats and things like that. It was really interesting. So that was my achievement there. And then after that I started working for an aerospace company up in Massachusetts. I worked on jet engines at GE, and they had this program where they kind of I don't want to get too many details, but you had this rotational program, and if you did successfully, they'd pay for you to go to grad school. And so I'm like, oh, MIT. What they don't tell you is they don't give you an in. To all the other grad schools in the Boston area, you had an in, but MIT, you had to really get in on your own. And it's kind of hard to do that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Seriously, it's easier to get into their business school for an MBA than it is to get into a grad school for a MS, the Master of Science, or SM as they say it. So I did that, and then I did some cool stuff at GE, like aeromechanics. Stuff that just sounds cool.
It does sound cool. Yeah.
We did I was on this proposal for the G38, which is on the CH53K, and I did all the aeromechanical analysis on that. So, and I did this cool model that modeled the how long it would stay on wing before they'd have to take it off and maintain it, which goes into their operation support costs, and it wound up in the executive summary of the proposal. So this is huge because it's funny because now I'm working at a totally different company now, and we're supplying parts to that engine. So
that's pretty rad.
Yeah, it's weird. It's cool shit. So anywho,
so if none of that made any sense to anybody in the audience, basically Gwen can blow shit up.
Yeah, it makes the fly. So anyway, I got into MIT, and then I did my degree more focused on lean, which is Toyota Production System, but it's big lean. It's kind of the socio-technical aspects of it. How do you make an organization more efficient and effective? How do you help a huge company transform itself? Because a lot of times you have your external context is changing. The business model might be changing,
Right.
and then how you design your enterprise changes. So I read a lot of stuff on like stakeholder theory and a lot of that. I had to write in MIT you have to do a thesis. You have to do a thesis to graduate with your master's. So I had a lot of stakeholder theory in that, and then weird stuff that you wouldn't think an engineer would have in it. And I also took I took this cool class in system safety, and we wound up doing like a hazard analysis for NASA. They're like, oh, our class project, we're gonna have NASA come in and
Yeah.
do an analysis for them. So it was just cool. So I could really call myself a rocket scientist. And then
Right. I mean, that's actually cool because you literally are a rocket scientist.
yeah, and my degree from MIT was in aeronautics and astronautics, and my research lab was Lean Advancement Initiative, so they do some really cool stuff, mostly with aerospace companies and how to get them more lean, but not at necessarily an operational level, but like at a more high level,
Sure.
allegorical.
And also not in the stomach region.
Yeah, not in the stomach region.
Not that type of lean. Although
Yeah,
that sounds like a really good name for like a boot camp program of some kind.
right, but definitely it does, and I could apply the lean and the weightlifting totally work together, and with my whole company, Risto Sports. Oh, so then I did a really geeky MIT thing while I was at MIT. While I was at MIT, Ivan and I started a company called Risto Sports, and it's just so mundane for an MIT graduate to start their own company. That's like the MIT thing to do. I think I had no idea that was it, you know.
That's just the thing that happens there.
Yeah, and then people would be like, "Oh, cool, you started a company," and they'd be like, "What is it? Biotech? Is it like IT software,
No.
weightlifting shoes, weightlifting?"
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I know. It's like It's like their face is just saying like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I have some friends, who, ended up getting their PhDs in math, and they now do mathy stuff. And yeah, I tell them, well, I'm doing something else now. What is that? Is it something cool? You're like, did you switch to economics or something? No, I didn't. I now run a club, a weightlifting club, and I listen to people drop heavy things all day long.
There's a lot of math involved, though. Don't
There
underestimate.
is. That's true. That's true. Although I avoid numbers at all costs. That's why I got a math degree. That's my joke. I got a math degree so that I could avoid counting ever again.
Yeah. So it's like in my current job, we make mostly pumps for the Boeing 787, like F-18s, T-700s, like all sorts of cool different types of planes and engines. And I'm doing lean, and I'm doing weird. I mean, I'm doing office side, like how the business works, but then I'm also doing stuff on the floor, like in manufacturing, which is so funny because before that, I had a job where I managed a repair program, and I was talking to captains of these air forces, and it's just so weird. I don't know.
Yeah. That's
And I'm
interesting. So I have my own ideas about this, but do you feel like there are any very clear reasons why it seems to be relatively common for people who are in weightlifting to also be into the sciences and things like that?
yeah.
That's not really particularly uncommon. I mean, there's a fair number of people, at least that I know, that are on that spectrum.
Well, you can calculate what your performance should be, based on your squat, based on the ratio of your snatch and your clean and jerk, that sort of thing. So I think there's definitely a numbers aspect to it.
Sure.
It's definitely if you understand physics, that helps you with technique.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
could see that there's that appeal, there's that kind of objectiveness to it that people would like.
Like you said earlier about you knew very well whether or not you were making progress because it's just kilos on a bar, rather than if you're a baseball player, who knows if you're doing better or not because a lot of it has to do with your team. You can win a game
Right.
and not do anything.
Geeky people have gone to baseball with sabermetrics, like the Boston Red Sox, how they won their first World Series in what was it, 80 years? They came up with all these weird metrics for calculating out, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
RBIs and all sorts of stuff like that. Who's really the best player based on their stats? And there's no reason
Sure.
we can't do that in weightlifting.
Yeah, that's true. Probably easier in weightlifting, actually.
Yeah, it is. Except the athletes tend to like math a lot more in weightlifting just for that reason. Because you can, I mean, you've never done that plot your lifting versus your squat
Oh, sure, yeah.
on. And then there's the whole Sinclair formula,
Yeah.
rates you against other lifters in a weight class. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. That's true. Yeah, I've always thought too that there's something about the fact that the mental skills required in math or science or music, for that matter, are really similar to the mental skills required to be a good weightlifter, because weightlifting is such a technical sport that you need to be able to, well, one, be patient and accept that you're going to screw up and fail a lot, and that happens a lot in math. So,
Oh yeah.
like if you're like, I remember, when I was getting my degree in math, that we would kind of be able to gauge people who would likely stick with it and likely wouldn't, just based on personality factors. Like if they got all pissed off every time they got a question wrong, they probably are going to fail and leave. If they were more like, well, this is an opportunity for me to figure out what I did wrong and then fix it, then that kind of personality is much more likely to stick with it over time and actually get better over time. That a lot of times it's not so much, like the joke is like, the only difference between a mathematician and everybody else is that mathematicians have no problem with failure. Like they just don't care. Like I'm cool with that. Like I'm going to fail because I'm going to keep going forward. And I feel like in weightlifting, it's constantly like that. Like you just constantly are doing something wrong.
No, but you're right. Like weightlifting, there's so much perseverance because we don't have an off season. You have to constantly be working at it. If you take more than 2 days off, your microfibers start getting untrained. And it's kind of like when you do math, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then you just, once you think you've gotten super smart at it, all of a sudden you work really hard and you get to a whole new level of smartness. And I actually noticed, like, okay, so weightlifting, you do tons of repetitions to get better. Like if you're not doing a lot of repetitions, you're going to flatline, whatever. So there's always this like central nervous system stress.
Yeah.
It's a ton of stress on your body and your mind, and also the whole staying focused aspect, getting in mental flow while you're lifting aspect. What I found though, like when I was studying my undergrad and my grad school, when I had really hard math problems, I had to like pound at that stuff, kind of like training, is you had to constantly be studying. Like I would study and restudy sections, spend hours, actually doing my homework.
Yeah.
No, because I found like the other thing is I found like in class I needed to like take notes to learn it.
Yeah.
Versus just listen, and I think that's also the kinesthetic aspect of being like a physical person.
Right.
So where was I going with this? I think I actually built up a really high threshold of work for my body by doing engineering, because I kind of had to force myself to get this greater mental central nervous system capacity.
Right.
And so when you go like, I probably went like what, 8 years not sleeping one night a week, 10 years not sleeping one night a week because of my undergrad and my grad and also working.
Yeah.
So what happens is now that I'm just working and like not going to grad school, I'm actually sleeping, 7 days a week. And I can take the training much better. Like it's not hard. Like doing 500 reps a week is no problem for me. I mean, and you're right, because I learned if I miss a rep, so what? Just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going at it. And in math or engineering, a lot of times you could sit and stare at a problem, and then you have to keep trying different ways to solve it, and then finally you get it, and it's like.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I had a math professor. He would say that a lot of times math is like stumbling around in the dark, and you sometimes get little glimpses here and there, and then one day you accidentally turn on the light, and then you're like, whoa! And you get
everything makes sense.
And everything makes sense.
Weightlifting's just like that.
I think weightlifting's very much like that. Like I think there's this transition in the first, however long, but there's probably multiple transitions like this. But there comes a point at which you're just horrible at like just moving a bar correctly. Like at the very beginning, it's just atrocious. And then something clicks, and you're able to kind of move pretty well with the bar. But then, like, when you start putting weight on, it goes to hell again. And then you have to get better at, like, okay, I can deal with that. But then you're still 70% away from what maybe could be your true max. And it's going to take you forever to have good technique at the higher and higher and higher and higher and higher weights. But each one of the times that you're able to get closer to that, it's like this new epiphany moment, where your body just kind of gets it.
And then once you get it, it's hard to slide back. Like if you slide
you kind of have that now.
I got it.
Right. It might have taken you like a year.
Well,
but
see, that's so true. Like for me, I'm way more explosive now than when I was like a teenager. Like I think all the stuff that like sprinters top out when they're like 20 or something is bullshit because I'm
Right.
way more fast than
Yeah.
what's it called when I was younger. But it's because when I was training with Ivan, I finally did enough work. Like I thought I was working hard when I was training by myself. No, I
Yeah.
wasn't. But now I did enough work where I finally got explosive. Like I got my slow twitch fibers to, or my mutant fibers to mutate to fast twitch.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you were saying. You know, you work, you think you're flatlined, and all of a sudden you shoot up.
Yeah.
In natural systems, most of the time they're exponential. I think all natural systems are exponential. They're not linear, but
Right.
there's some sort of
That's the more
combination.
standard is the exponential. Yeah.
Right, and most people think linear. They think your progress should be like this.
Right.
No,
And I
it's
think
more
that's where the
like
frustration comes from. Is this
yeah,
when the reality doesn't conform with your belief that it's supposed to be linear,
yes,
then it's brutal, right? I mean, it can really affect
it
you
is.
emotionally.
It is. It's like you're trying to make that fire, and I stole this from this book, The Zone. And it's like you're at, was it 450 degrees, and you have to get to one more degree, and you'll hit the fire, and then you just stop because you've already been doing it for 5 minutes. You're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Now, ball sports, you're on a team, so you're gonna win some games, you're gonna lose some games, so you get like some reinforcement when you win games. In weightlifting, you might be stuck at the same lift for like several months, and you might be like, why am I doing this to myself? Then all of a sudden, boom. Your
Yeah.
lift up.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's really fascinating. I think that especially for the first year or two maybe of training, like I think a lot of your success comes from your brain being able to wrap itself around that's how training works. And then when you get that, then you can really push through and push hard even during those periods, like you're saying, where your lift hasn't actually gone up for a couple months, but you still have to push really hard in order for you to move that little bit, and then things explode. And then you go
Yeah.
through another plateau period,
Yeah.
But if you don't have the right mindset, you'll give up all the time.
Right.
You'll kind of pull back too much, and you don't get those repetitions in. You don't get that work in, and that total workload just isn't there because you were kind of wimping out because you were too psychologically like, oh, I can't. This isn't. I'm not. Nothing's happening for me. Clearly, this isn't working.
And what a lot of people don't realize, it adds up over time. So
Yeah.
you might get someone who comes in off the street and they're incredibly strong. Maybe they did shot put or something like that. But it's going to still take them years to get really good technique and to
Yeah.
really hit their potential. Whereas, you have someone like me who's trained for many years. I just need to get stronger. That's it.
Right.
I just have to get an S load stronger, and it's easier to get stronger than it is to get good technique and explosive. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, exactly. And that's, taking somebody who's already really strong can be so misleading because they look like they're doing something really awesome on the like day one, like to somebody who doesn't really know what's going on. They go, whoa, that person just, this dude walks in the gym and clean and jerks 300 pounds or something, and you're like, oh my God. When really a weightlifter who is just as strong would have like a 400 pound clean and jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Like,
Or he's already doing 150, so maybe he'll do 200 in 2 years. And what happens is, it's like they don't have the technique, they don't have the explosiveness, they don't have the work ethic. Because you know what I mean? Because you could take, what am I going to say? Like a kid off the street, and maybe if they're doing 80 kilos, they might be better conditioned because they have that mentality and mindset, and they're willing to put in the time.
Yeah, I say it almost as a joke, but I don't actually really mean it as a joke. That I would rather take a golfer or a tennis player or somebody like that and turn him into a weightlifter than take somebody who is like a football player, because I feel like the mentality of somebody that if you've gotten good at a technical sport previously, you probably know just sort of intuitively, even if you don't know it consciously, you'll probably have some intuitive grasp of how the training works and how you get better. And I can make you stronger. And I can, and all of that stuff. But I need you to have the right mindset in order to get you to the level of having proper technique. Because that's the stuff it's about diligence. A ridiculous amount of diligence, not just yelling and screaming at the squat rack.
I think that's why, like gymnasts make really good weightlifters.
Right. Yeah, they have that already. Yeah, and right. I mean, it's not just because they've built in explosiveness or strength. It's because they've gotten good at really hard technical stuff.
Right, and their central nervous system can handle it. Whereas, like powerlifters, there are so many people in this country who probably squat more than world champions in weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah.
But like you get them to lift, and like you said, they'll walk in the gym. They'll be like, "Holy shit, that girl just cleaned 90 kilos." But what happens is she never cleans more than 100 because like her
In her
technique
career, yeah.
is so effed up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really fascinating. You said something about earlier that I wanted to touch on, which is the idea of just the total amount of work that you're doing now is substantially larger than what you're doing when you were training on your own.
Yeah,
And this is something that I really believe in. I know it freaks some people out sometimes, and you get these tweets back. Like what in the world? I had this article up last week about the 21-day squat challenge. And it sounds crazy to other people. It's really nothing abnormal for what a lot of my lifters do, like squatting pretty much every day and doing a lot of it, sometimes multiple times a day, that kind of thing. It's not a big deal. That's pretty normal for a lot of weightlifting clubs, no matter what, quote unquote training system they use. A substantial amount of work is pretty universal. But outside of the world of, sports, and certainly this sport,
yes.
I think the idea of, the word hard or a lot, these very relative, subjective terms, they have much lower meanings than what they do for a lot of
They
weightlifters.
do, except for like wrestlers. I think wrestlers is the only sport where they're like, "Oh, you want me to go squat and do like 30 reps in a workout?" Oh yeah, sure. But you're
Yeah.
right. Other sports, like we had this guy who was a professional baseball player, and he was doing so well, so well. But he left after like a month and a half because he's like, the training is just too hard. He was like,
Right.
"Oh, I lost weight. I'm gonna get weak." Well, actually, it turned out he dropped body fat percentage, and then when he went back to his home country, his total went up a whole bunch.
That's
And he
awesome. Yeah.
was, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you're right. It's like, but he came from baseball, and I'm not knocking on baseball players, whatever. But I'm just saying, for example, the whole concept of work was totally different. And then you always get these
Right.
idiots, especially when I was in the Georgia Tech weight room. I get basketball players being like, "Isn't that bad for your knees? All that squatting."
Yeah, if you do like so much, then like your knees are gonna blow up or something.
And that's when I only squatted like 4 times a week.
Right. Right.
Sometimes 3. I mean, how bad was that? I really had no idea what I was doing.
It is funny. People will think squatting 3 days a week is a lot.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's
Not
definitely
enough. It's not enough. I think there may be some in order for people to wrap their mind about it around things, they'll make analogies, and sometimes the analogies work, and sometimes they definitely don't. So, like the analogy of a lot of work for a weightlifter, they might just sort of the closest thing in their mind maybe is like a marathon runner, and truthfully, marathon runners tend to have a substantial amount of injuries, and most of them are overuse injuries. And so it's reasonable to say, like, well, the amount of work they're doing is bad for them. So,
okay.
therefore, lots of work is bad. That's not a good argument, but
No,
I can see why people might initially have this feeling that, doing ridiculous amounts of work every day will result in injury. But that's because there's a difference in the type of work and how it's done, et cetera. And
yes,
so the allotness of work isn't the factor that results in injury. It's how the work is done that results in injury. And I think that
right.
it sounds so insane what a lot of weightlifters do. I think what I find funny, and this is the guys in my gym and I all sort of feel this way, that actually we feel lazier than most other athletes. Like we train a lot and we do a lot of stuff, and it sounds crazy on paper,
Okay.
but when you actually do it, yeah, it's hard work, but honestly, I find this to be a lot less work than doing like a bunch of CrossFit WODs every day. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like a lot more hard work to me, as far as just like serious fatigue, like I'm gonna crawl on the ground and like be weeping, you know. I never have those kinds of feelings in the gym, like.
Right, right. Like when you work with a training system, you have a direction. You have a strategic direction. You know what you're going to do. You're doing it for a reason. Work without reason is waste.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good line. Write that down, people. Work without reason is
I'm
waste.
trademarking it right now as we speak.
Yes. .com.
Yeah, but that's why I train with a program. It's like you could. That's another thing. Like you could work really hard and not get anything out of it. If you work with a training system, then you'll progress.
Yeah.
So again, just doing squats to failure is not going to help your Olympic weightlifting.
That's not a training system.
No, it's not. It's just being a meathead. I don't know.
Right.
You're like, I did this to failure. Oh yeah, I'm so tough.
I did 35 reps today. Therefore, yeah, exactly. You know, that is interesting. I think that, you know, the old line that you're better off on a bad program that you stick to than a good program that you don't does make a lot of sense. I mean, having any kind of strategic plan, even if it's not the best strategic plan, that you actually put into practice,
Yeah.
will work out better for you than, you know, just taking little bits here and there of certain kinds of training routines. And, you know, maybe you work real hard at this little tiny thing component, but you're not really taking into account that the reason the routine works is because of the holistic system.
Yes.
That's why it works. It's why, you know, it's a little dangerous for sometimes, I'm probably guilty of this, but, you know, clubs like mine that are a little more on the Bulgarian spectrum, it can be really misleading sometimes what gets put down on a piece of paper about what's actually happening in the gym. And so people will just latch themselves onto, like you said, like the squatting to maximum every day.
Yeah, exactly. Because they want to feel like a lot of people like to max out every day because they want to feel like they're getting better.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have weeks where the most I'll snatch is maybe 60 kilos that whole week. But on that Sunday, I might go up to 75, which isn't even my max.
Right.
But you know what I mean? But especially in the American mentality, especially when I was a kid, I was like, holy crap, I better go up to at least 75 every day because that's like my 90-something%. You know, but you don't have to do that. You actually get less by going heavier every single day. So, but then again, it comes to a whole holistic system. You have your macro cycle, your mesocycle, and your microcycle. So you got to look at it week by week, 12 weeks at a time, and then like 6 months at a time, basically. So it's okay to do, you know, lower weights as long as you're keeping the volume up. I mean, for us, it's all about number of repetitions at different intensity zones.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I think I would caution people, though, you don't want a totally piece of crap workout. If you really have no idea what you're doing, there's a lot of people who you could contact and even buy just like a beginner program from. You know, like certainly at Risto Sports we do that, and I'm sure that you do that at your gym too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it is nice, actually, that in today's world, you know, really very different than even just maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there is an abundance of good information now that's available. You might have to do a lot of sifting because there's just an abundance of information, period, good and bad. But at least with the internet, there's a heck of a lot of stuff out there. And that did not exist, you know, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think, and you know what, I think a lot of people forget how new the internet actually is in terms of when it hit critical mass of like everyone having it. Because my parents were always like late adopters, like we're the last people to get cable, that type of thing. I didn't have like email until 1998.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time there was no weightlifting stuff on the web, very little, just maybe the International Weightlifting Federation site, the USA Weightlifting site. And then even into the early 2000s, you couldn't just find a program on the internet.
Yeah.
Maybe other than like the Russian squat program. But now, in the last 3 to 4 years, holy, there is so much out on the web.
There's an insane amount, yeah.
Some of it complete BS, but there's still some credible stuff, or at least there's contact info for people who could get you credible information. And it didn't used to be like that.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful. I think that it's one of the things that's going to continue to drive the newfound, you know, growth of weightlifting, which is definitely on the rise in a way that it hasn't been before. And I think the internet is a pretty substantial reason for that, if not the primary reason.
And like YouTube, you could see what a snatch and clean and jerk look like. I remember, you know, when I was a teenager, you know, like back in 2000, if you told someone to snatch and clean and jerk, you'd have to explain to them. You couldn't just show them a picture. Now I'm like, just go on YouTube, type in snatch. You'll see what I mean.
Right. It won't be what you think it's going to be.
It's not. You ever do that? Like someone asks what it is, you try to like show the motion. You're wearing like,
Yeah.
you know, high heels and super tight jeans that don't move, and it's like, yeah, this isn't what it looks
You've
like.
described me very well.
Oh, dude, that's cool.
That's
That's
awesome.
cool. See, that's why we have so much in common.
I
Yeah.
know. Mostly it's the clothes. So, in addition to you're being a weightlifter and a rocket scientist, you did in fact start a company, and it's a weightlifting company, and that's pretty cool. I like the fact that you guys basically do run one of the cooler, like this family business in weightlifting. I like that. It's not like a giant corporate like Adidas is great and all, but Adidas has other things they do, right?
Yeah.
They're not like their life is not weightlifting, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Whereas Risto Sports is, it's a family-run operation. Tell us more about like the start of Risto Sports, what it's kind of about, et cetera. Like, what do you think?
It's like I don't want to say it's by weightlifters for weightlifters because a lot of people have said that about whatever they're doing, but that's kind of like what it is. The whole point of Risto Sports is to help promote weightlifting in the United States and around the world, especially because at the time when we started in 2008, there were still people who didn't know what a snatch was or a clean and jerk was, and I guess there still are today. But it was also to give athletes another outlet for getting high quality equipment. Because in most sports, you do in your fringe sports, like fencing or weightlifting, you do have the big companies like Adidas who provide outfitting, etc. But there's
Yeah.
still like this need for like a company like us to give like really specialized, high quality equipment that big companies like Adidas aren't going to offer, and you wouldn't blame them because they have contracts with football players, soccer players. They probably make a bajillion dollars with that. Why would they cater to weightlifting, right?
Right.
So that's where someone like me comes in, or Ivan and I come in because we're experts in weightlifting. He has, way more weightlifting experience than I do, and I have a ton of weightlifting experience, right?
Right.
So we both competed internationally, et cetera, et cetera. He's studied all around the world. So when we make a product, it's very specialized for weightlifting. It's we don't sacrifice performance. Like that's why we still have a wood heel. People are like, "Oh, isn't that too low tech?" I'm the geek from MIT. I'm like, God, I wish I could find something more high tech. But then again, wood's pretty high tech. We still make
Right.
yachts out of it, right?
Yeah, Evolution did a pretty good job on that one.
Well, yeah, your house I can see has wood molding.
It does. Yeah, it's very cool looking in.
I don't know, just use some injection mold plastic for your house's molding. I don't know. 'Cause
Right.
wood it expands, it contracts, it molds to your foot. It has
Yeah.
a lot of good properties. So that's one part. The other part is we have a gym now where we do training services. We don't really have a ton of gym members. It's mostly, you could hear everybody coming in right now. It's mostly we have high-level elite lifters from around the world who come train with us. They do training camps with us. My husband, Ivan, does a lot of programming
Right.
for distance athletes. Like he has athletes all over the world that'll ask him to send them programs, and he'll give them advice over the internet. And if they have by chance are in the Boston area or in Southern Maine, they'll come in and do a session with him. We also do a lot of consulting for CrossFitters. Like
Yeah.
we'll have people who come up from Boston. They'll spend a whole day here for a set. We have a program for them to do, etc., and
Yeah.
like the whole shebang. And then we do seminars. So what it is we're kind of like this beacon of weightlifting in New England,
That's awesome.
and it's pretty cool. And like right now we have like high school wrestlers training with us, and that's more of like supporting the community type of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're state champions, so I want to see these kids like get super jacked and win like the nationals. That would be awesome.
That would be pretty rad. Yeah. Totally. So explain to me a little bit why it is that your shoes still have such a big heel when everybody else's heels seem to get shrinking over time.
It's so funny. This is so damn funny because when we
And I don't
first
mean the heels on your like like I got cowboy boot heels, but we're talking about the shoes that you guys sell, Risto shoes.
yeah, this is so funny because when we first started making the shoes, some people told us our heels were too low. Because I remember Dewin had over 1.5 inch heel.
Yeah, when they came out, they had a big heel.
They
Yeah.
had a big ass heel, and it wasn't like gradually sloped. It was kind of steep too. And hey, whatever. It works for some people, but at that time, we came in with a heel that was maybe a tad higher than Adidas.
Yep.
And all along, since then, everyone else's heels have gotten smaller to the point that they're smaller than our heels.
Yeah.
So first of all, I really think the heel height that we have is optimal for a majority of the population. Most people might even need a heel even higher than that.
Yep.
There are very few people who need a completely flat heel. And by the way, that doesn't make you a better weightlifter. If your biomechanics say you need a completely flat heel, that doesn't mean you're going to be a better suited for weightlifting.
Yeah, that's a myth, I think.
That's what's funny. Like, the fact that you need a heel doesn't mean you're less genetically better for weightlifting. If anything, I think a lot of the good weightlifters have that body type where a heel helps them.
Yeah. In fact,
So I think it's the right position.
There's a surprisingly large number of very good lifters who raise the heel on their shoe.
Yes. Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
That's not a weird thing. It's pretty darn normal, actually.
Right.
They just realize that they can hit the positions better if they do that. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes maybe this is, I don't know what this is coming from, but this may have something to do with CrossFit's tendency to want everything to be quote unquote natural. And
Yeah.
I support that mostly. You know, there's something to that. We just don't want to roll into what's called the naturalistic fallacy, where just because something's natural, it's good.
Yeah.
And the idea that human beings were in some sense, you know, evolved to overhead squat is clearly false, right?
Oh, this is awesome. I love what you just said, because Ivan, when he does seminars, one of the first things he talks about is how weightlifting is not a natural movement.
Right.
Like, okay, if a bear is chasing after you, does every person who can walk know how to run? Does anyone think, oh shit, I'm gonna run?
Right.
Okay, maybe people who know you're not supposed to run won't run, but your innate reaction is, I better run the heck out of here, right?
Right. There's a bear.
Now, the other thing Ivan will give an example of, you know, even if we throw you in the water, people will start doing this.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows how to swim, but people will kind of thrash around because it's kind of innate.
Yeah.
Weightlifting, if someone asks you to pick up a huge stone, people will try totally different things. Some people will try to use leverage. Some people will try to push it.
Sure,
So
yeah.
weightlifting is all about technique. It's not a natural sport. The only thing that's natural is that it's up and down, and it's not lateral. So
Sure.
the up and downness doesn't wear on your joints, whereas the lateral, like in basketball, it wears out your joints. So what I'm saying is, weightlifting's not a natural movement. You can't say, oh, we shouldn't wear heels because I want to be naturalistic. But seriously, I mean,
You started to sound very much like you live in my Portland.
dude, I meditate, I'm in touch with nature and all that, but seriously, you just don't need to go barefoot. Why would you give up, you know, easily 20% of your lift by going barefoot or with a flat heel?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? I like, my little brother gave me this line. It's like, would Superman give up another superpower? You know what I mean? Just give up a superpower. Would Superman be like, you know what? I can already fly. I'm going to give up being bulletproof. It's kind
Yeah.
of like that with weightlifting. You know, I can overhead squat kind of without heels, but because I want to be natural, I'm not going to use heels.
Yeah.
That's silly. And if you look at it, you know, most shoes have heels on them. It's more comfortable.
Yeah. Even like a men's dress shoe
Yeah.
has a heel on it, you know, and that's a shoe for a conservative male. It still has a heel on it. You know, my cowboy boots have like a 2-inch heel on them, and that's probably why I have, you know, Risto shoes, and I put an extra 9mm.
I know.
Because, you know, it makes my calves look better.
Well, that's seriously, like, because I played around with my heel heights, and right now I have an 1.5-inch heel, and I get my hips right under me. It gets abs, my full use of my back, you know. Because, like, the other thing is, if you use too low a heel, your stance is going to get wider and wider. And that puts a
The
ton of...
only way you can keep your torso upright, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, again, there's going to be some guy or girl who's going to be like, hey, I don't use a heel and I'm able to lift. Okay, so there's like a tiny percentage of the population that doesn't. But you know what? I don't see a whole hell of a lot of flat shoe people winning the world championships. So,
Right.
But anywho, I'm just saying, if this was a marketing ploy, I would actually go totally flat heel because that would be cheaper to make. Like, it's way cheaper to make an injection mold heel or a flat rubber heel than it is a wood shoe. Like you even look at my website, our trainers, which have a flat textured heel, are substantially less expensive than our wood heel shoes because wood is actually difficult to work with. You have to know what you're doing. It takes a lot of craftsmanship. You have to custom match the heels to each shoe and make sure they match. So where was I going with this? I think other companies have gone with the whole lower heel thing because it's also a cost savings.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's easier to make a shoe without a wooden heel, or a heel that's just a wood insert or a cork insert.
Right. So, yeah, I mean that's something I try to get across to people a little bit is whatever even if it wasn't a Risto shoe, it was some other shoe. I mean, looking at the heel height is not a small issue if you are at all serious about weightlifting. You are going to, and you don't have to feel bad about it. And maybe that's, I think, the thing is, that there is sort of a strange myth that rolls around it. The reason you need that heel is because your ankle mobility sucks so bad.
Yeah, that's bullshit too.
Yeah, and that's not the reason. That's not the key issue here. I mean, more often than not, I think that the biggest reason people don't squat well a lot of times has more to do with hip mobility than it does with ankle mobility, even though the buzz seems to be about ankle mobility.
Everybody has, I think it just comes down to the ratio of length between like your femurs, your tibia and fibula,
Yeah.
how wide your hips are, stuff like that. Because, I mean, remember how I said I did no physical activity when I was a kid, except maybe I horseback rode like twice a month?
Right.
It was really expensive. And it was like a half hour from my house. I had super awesome ankle mobility because anyone who rides horses like English style and they do equitation and all that stuff, your heels have to be like this. Like they want you to stretch your heels down as much as possible. You're supposed to keep your heels down,
Right.
and put all the weight on the ball of your foot, which is kind of counter to weightlifting. So,
that is like the anti-weightlifting right there.
well, because when you're like when you're posting, you're grabbing the horse with like your thighs, and you have your heels down. But anyway,
Right.
the whole point is, I have super awesome ankle mobility.
Yeah.
But because of how my body is formed, a heel helps me get into an overhead squat or a squat without shoving my feet way out to the side.
Sure.
I can definitely lift in a shoe with an inch heel, but it's going to wear the F out of my hip flexors, and it's going to put more stress on my back.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not good for me, basically.
I think that would be maybe the last point about the heel is that I think people have the impression that a higher heel means more damage to your body doing the movements. I think there's this whole movement like the 80s where people were like, getting on women for walking around in high heels all the time.
I remember
It was destroying their back or whatever else. And I think the irony is that you're actually going to be able to squat safer with the heel on because of what you just said, right? Your hips are going to be in a more natural position. They're not going to be flailed out super wide, which, I mean, at some point, if you get wide enough, you can't go below a certain point because your hips will literally lock, like just bone on bone.
Stress on your knees.
And then, there's much more stress there. And then, obviously, you're going to have to lean forward a lot more, which creates more torque on the lower back. So that's not a good thing as a rule.
You want to keep your spine vertically loaded. It's all that torque. Oh, I can show you studies on this too. But anyway, yeah. We're not, when we say heels, we're not talking like stilettos. All the weight is on your toe.
Right, unless you're Prince.
We're talking kind of like this,
Yeah, exactly.
An inch and a half heel actually really isn't that big. I think most of our shoes are an inch and a quarter. That's not a high heel at all. Like you said,
like I said, I mean, I'm wearing cowboy boots, and cowboy boots have about a 2-inch heel. So, that's bigger than most weightlifting shoes, that are out there.
Yeah, and are you going to tell a cowboy that his boots are too high heeled? Like, sorry, I think you kick your butt if you say that to them. So
now I feel like I have to go see a cowboy and say, "Hey, boy, your boots are too tall."
I bet you can find one out in Oregon. Or I'm sorry.
Oh, there's a lot of cowboys out here. Yeah, that's true. Not in the area I live. Like, this is the weird thing about Portland, is that it's like this little ridiculously uber liberal hippie enclave in the middle of what is very much like super cowboy land right outside. Like you go outside the city boundaries and you are instantaneously on a horse, just like that. Magically, your car turns into a horse.
That sounds really cool.
It is actually really cool. It's probably why I have this weird combo of like my silly jewelry and cowboy boots at the same time.
Yeah, she had like a turquoise bracelet. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that thing. Yeah, I've actually kind of toned down, honestly. I used to be even more jewelry up and dolled out, but I've been butching it up over the last few years for some reason. Hanging out with all these weightlifters.
Yeah, it just toughened you up, obviously.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, clearly I'm a tough guy. That's my thing. So you guys said you talked about how you guys have a your own training facility there, and you do a lot of programming for people.
Try to make this more ergonomic. Sorry.
I'll allow you to do it.
Oh.
As long as you still have a heel on, then I'll allow you to do it.
I'm messing up. Yeah, I'm wearing flat shoes right now, actually, and I find them uncomfortable.
I'm the same way. I really do. Yeah, I
They're
prefer
really
heel.
cool though, because I got them in Taiwan when I was at the World University Championships, but I don't like flat shoes. They're just
Right.
But these are cool.
They're not as cool looking. Let's face it.
I mean, they're pretty, but if they had a heel, it'd be better. Anyway, so what were you saying?
I was saying maybe you can give a rundown a little bit of the type of programming you guys tend to do. You know, like on the show before, we've talked a lot about different types of programming. There's lots of stuff out there. I think people get kind of confused about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I think it'd be interesting to hear what it is you guys do as a rule, how you like to program stuff, and then maybe, like, what would you do if you had a rank beginner walk in the gym, and like what would they be?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's actually that's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
So first, let me start off by saying all the people running Risto Sports have actually been to Bulgaria, so we actually have seen the Bulgarian system firsthand. So when we talk about, we're not just BSing like most people are.
Right.
And then all the people writing programs have been to the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union. So
Right.
and also Cuba. So we start off by using more of the Cuban system, which kind of works with what you have. They have so few people in Cuba that like it's what's it called? They don't just throw lifters away. They use strategic direction. How can I what can I do for this athlete that's going to make them a good weightlifter?
Sure. Yeah.
Right now, though, we're doing more of a pure Soviet system, and so our technical director he worked with Medvedev, and actually Medvedev quoted him in many of his landmark books that people sell in bad translations in English and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But basically, the Soviet system is where all the other systems come from. So before the Soviet system, there wasn't like a weightlifting system. It was just like Americans were just kicking everyone's butt, and they were just probably training a little bit harder than everyone else.
Sure.
And plus, they're awesome too. So, but after that, the Soviets, they did research. They did empirical studies. They did tons of studies on like repetitions, loading intensities,
Sure.
time of day to train, frequency of training, and from that, people took that information and created their own systems.
Yeah.
So even like the Chinese system is a derivative of the Soviet system.
Right.
So anywho, we use
Right.
mostly right now a classical Soviet system, and that means an S load of repetitions. It's all about volume at different intensity zones. Now, like 1 week, I might have a really heavy volume week, and I might only go into like a lower zone if it's like a strength building phase. But the next week, I'll have an unloading week. I usually don't do 2 weeks of S load of repetitions in a row. So the next week, I do a little bit fewer repetitions. And then you gradually go through this build-up phase, and then when you get into the competition phase, you do fewer and fewer repetitions. But still, the amount of repetitions I do in the competition phase is still like 400 a week. It's still way more than most people do.
Right.
Except in the competition phase, I do a higher intensity zone. So when I'm in the non-competition phase, I focus more on like strength and explosiveness. So you might do more power snatches from the hang. But when you're in competition phase, it's more technical work. Which means is if you're in the strength building phase and you have like a local meet you want to go to, you're not going to peak as well as if you're in the competition phase. And so there's this whole thing of like biorhythms and recovery that it utilizes, and there's a lot of science that goes into it. if we had a beginner, the first thing we would do is teach them technique. So Ivan uses the inverted system, which he could probably explain to you in another interview, whatever. But it's basically you learn the snatch backwards,
Sure.
and anybody who learns the snatch backwards can masterize it in like 45 minutes. Masterize it to the level of like an intermediate lifter,
Right.
probably better than most people who compete at nationals.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Yeah.
I do the same thing. I think it's so much smarter to learn basically from the top down rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and so you
Yeah.
learn like from here, and then you learn each part in sections, and then you put
Mm-hmm.
it together.
Right. Right. That's really cool. Nice.
But that works, and I know in like the Polish system, they always learn the snatch first. We always teach the snatch first.
Yeah.
In America, they like to teach the clean and jerk first. They're in the USA weightlifting materials, at least from the early 2000s and 90s. They always said teach the clean and jerk first. I don't know exactly why that is. I think they think it's because it's easier to learn it. But but honestly, the pull is very similar between the snatch and the clean and jerk. Like the bar trajectory is kind of the same idea. Keep it really damn close to you and explode past your hips.
Right.
So it's better to learn the snatch first, which is the more technical lift.
Yeah.
There's
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's other reasons I'm not going to really go into. I probably should let Ivan talk about. But that's how we do it. So beginners, so with the wrestlers who started training with us, they did very light weights at first. And a lot of people, because of their ego, they will quit the first couple weeks because all they're doing is bar work.
Yep.
It's serious. Maybe they're only
Especially if they're in a gym with a bunch of people who, are already lifting heavier weights, and they're looking over there going, "Oh man!"
Yeah, especially when you get big dudes who could squat like 600 pounds, and it's like, no, you can't go higher than 60 pounds the first week.
And then there's some attractive girl out lifting them on the snatch right now, and they're like, "Oh, she'll never go out with me if I can't snatch more than her."
Right, so he's like 15 pounds, she's snatching 60 kilos, and he's only 30 kilos. We're like, no, this is the right way to do it. Just hang with it. But it always going slow. It's like going slow to go fast. So doing that is always the best thing. So depending on their age, especially, like if you have a young kid, technique is so important, and they're growing, and you don't want to mess them up. You don't want to get them injured. Yeah. If you have someone who's done some Olympic lifting before, maybe they came from track or baseball or football, you could start them off a little bit faster. Still, the first week we might only do technique, but they could start using weights a little bit sooner than if you had like a little kid, so to say.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think if you're listening to this right now, the point about learning snatch first and doing it from a top-down approach is probably a really important takeaway. That if you're learning on your own, especially, it's a really good idea to sort of take out as many things that could screw you up as possible, because you don't have necessarily anybody there to watch you. Yeah. So if you can bring it down to just a couple of key basics and just focus on nothing but snatch for a while and get the top portion down correctly, and just don't move on until you get that, and then do the next section. Don't move on until you get that. You're probably going to end up just leaps and bounds better than everybody around you in the long run, even though, you're going to feel a little funny at first, but, Pat Mendez, currently best super heavy in America, he spent a month with a stick. A month. He could already power clean, I don't know what it was, ridiculous amounts of weight. But he wasn't allowed to move forward until he got it right with a stick. And that's not abnormal. That's like an example that I use just because we all know that he's really big and strong. But the fact is that's actually a fairly normal thing to do in weightlifting, is to keep it mellow and slow. And I think that maybe plays into a little bit we were talking about at the beginning, where the personality has to kind of be there. That's either going to be something you get or you don't get. That
right.
A potential lifter is going to come in and be either in the group that says, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, I'm going to totally drill this and get this down, or they're going to be just kind of angry the whole time.
It's just like, you know what? It's been 5 minutes, and I'm still only doing 45 pounds. I'm getting the F out of here because that girl just lifted more than me. Goodbye. That's like the worst thing. I can't tell you how many guys we've seen quit in like the first week because they just can't take not doing heavier weights. And you're right, it's the mentality.
It's the mentality.
So maybe it's not the right sport for them then.
Yeah. And it may be one of the reasons why I get along with so many weightlifters, because anybody who's gone through the process of trying to figure out weightlifting, no matter where level they get to. You know, I mean, there's your own sense. You're getting better and better, you know, on your own compared to yourself. That means we kind of weed out totally impatient people who can't deal with that kind of thing. And so that probably has a lot to do with why I just get along with a lot of weightlifters as people, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's a different kind of patience. It's not just waiting for someone to get ready to go out to the store. It's like
it's not waiting for something to happen to you.
It's like that. It really is like that Zen master type of patience. It's very much like if you ever watch Jackie Chan movies.
Yeah.
He doesn't fight unless he's provoked. He really, really tries not to fight, and then all of a sudden someone throws a punch and then he just destroys them and like shh. You know. But it's very much like that. There's a certain tranquility you have to have.
Yeah.
It's sort of waiting for it to like happen, and then when it happens, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
And then you're never done getting better. You can always get better.
Yeah.
You always work on your technique.
Right, which I think, yet again, that's another thing where, you know, depending upon your personality, that's either awesome or horrible. Yeah, some people want to get good at something really fast, be done, and then know they're awesome at it. And that they're done, right? And other people like to get into something where they always have something else to do and learn and get better at.
Right, so that's like my day job. I was telling you with the whole lean manufacturing, lean enterprise. It's all about you can always get better.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to like eliminate waste, get this more efficient, effective. Like it's almost like coming in like a consultant and being like, you could do this better and that better.
Yeah.
But it's fun because when you think you've gotten to the top level and then you improve something to like here, it's like wow.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, that's pretty good. I think we can wrap this up a little bit. So, shameless plug time. Where can people go to check out your heels and the other awesome stuff at Risto Sports?
www.ristosports.com, RISTOSPORTS. So RISTO and then sports, plural.com. Awesome.
RistoSports.com. And of course, in the show notes on the site, Weightlifting Academy, I will have a link to that. So if y'all want to check out some of the Risto Sports stuff, I do recommend it. It is good stuff. I use it. A lot of my lifters in my gym use their goodies.
Right, and we're not just shoes. We also do programming. It's on the website.
Yeah.
If that's a little confusing, email us at info@ristosports.com. I think we even do like a $10 video analysis.
Nice. So in case you're worried that you got an ugly snatch, they will check it out for you. All right, Gwen. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks. Talk to you later. Bye!